You know that one of the funniest English language authors in history wrote a bunch of video games, and they're really good? Well, you probably already did, because Terry Pratchett made that huge Oblivion mod that nerds like to bring up as a trivia point, but also Douglas Adams also made stuff on earlier, clunkier, uglier hardware. Yes, it's possible to be uglier than Oblivion. I'm talking about an Infocom text adventure. And you know, that's a great type of game to talk about in an audiovisual medium. I thought about doing something with footage from the 1980s TV series, which ran the risk of getting copyright struck, and then I looked into how hard it would be to make animations like that show segments of the guide, and then I remembered part of the reason why I'm doing these videos of old articles made into YouTube videos is to make things easier on myself and not require a new animation job. And so you get this, some slides, and the moon, our finest of orbs. Now, I want to complain about Twine briefly for the nichest of niche market beefs. You might not know what Twine is, but essentially it's a platform for the creation of text adventure-like browser games. That is, if you consider a text adventure to be about making things interact by clicking on text prompts, you can pretty much make anything in that vein using Twine. Twine is a pretty powerful engine for what could be best visualized as a kind of wiki that you get to walk around, and it has an exit point. I'm not against Twine, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I feel that the web browser is the wrongest way to do a text adventure. Parser games are understandably less accessible. That is, a game where you have a text prompt and you choose the words you want to type in and put into it. They're famously hard to make comprehensively responsible to the way a player might engage with them, until that player has learned to speak to the parser. This is incidentally part of why people think that they can run a D&D game through something like ChatGPT. It is teaching them how to get good responses out of it. It also sometimes reminds me of how I frame poker. Poker is a game where you and the other players spend enough time with one another to create a common language. How you bid, how quickly you bid, all of that kind of thing. And then you can see how you use that language to lie to one another. Parser video games can kind of do something like that too, but all of that language is set up ahead of time and a little remotely. It had opportunities to create interesting tension, such as if a developer didn't consider a particular word that could be a noun or a verb, as in the famous put-bag bottle problem from Leisure Suit Larry 2. You don't know about the put-bag bottle problem. Okay, so look, in Leisure Suit Larry 2, you have to hastily construct a Molotov cocktail, kinda, with a bottle of fuel, kinda, and a paper air sickness bag from an airplane. There's a bug of sorts in the late stage of the game, where most people are typing phrases like put bag bottle or use bag bottle. Normally, if that doesn't work, the game will just say something like, I don't understand, which is a good way the games handle a lot of their error states. But in the case of this little bag and this little bottle, instead Larry does something else entirely with its own animation and puts the game into a failed state. He chucks the bottle down into the volcano you're standing over. This makes sense at the time. Thing is, what was going on there was that the parser could interpret the word bag as a verb. The way the parser worked to tidy up commands was to consider the first verb and the last noun, because that's all it needed usually, and it helped to clean up the inputs when players were using unnecessary adjectives that might accidentally confuse the parser. Effectively, the parser was dumber than it looked, but it was capable of weeding out things it didn't think it needed, and most of the time that worked. If you're in a room with 4 phones and only one of them is ringing, answer phone is functionally the same as answer the yellow phone in the middle, because the game would recognize that in the middle wasn't a noun, and since only one phone was ringing, knowing you meant the yellow one didn't mean anything to it. You could use this to weird results in speedruns of some games, where you could type an extensive list of commands nested inside one another, like use hat, screw, fluff, bug, potion, and then just delete the words at the end each time you repeated the input. In the case of the Leisure Suit Larry bug, the way around it was the use of the word the. You had to put the bag in the bottle, but also not put bag in bottle, because it's missing the word the that indicates bag is a noun. Parsers are hard, and all of this predicates on the idea that you're a person who looks at the word bag and thinks of it as a verb before you consider its applications as a noun. So this is why I'm talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. See, text parser games introduce ways you can be wrong, and it introduces ways that you can be frustrated. And those elements were definitely part of Douglas Adams' vision of games in the text adventure game Bureaucracy. That game has a limited number of inputs you can make at all. A typo uses up one of your inputs. If you check your inventory because you're stuck, that uses up one of your inputs. You ultimately need to only ever make correct, non-frustrating inputs to get through that literally and deliberately Kafkaesque form input system of a game. And that means you need to know how all the puzzles are solved ahead of time. The only way to do that is to do the puzzles, note how you did it perfectly, then restart the game to do it again. This is before widely distributed cheat code or walkthrough websites. This game was explicitly, deliberately, inconveniently difficult, and it was trying to manipulate you and how you interacted with it. Basically, you should hate Bureaucracy because it was trying to make you hate it. I know I've never finished it, even if I'm very impressed with the dedication to the bit. Douglas Adams would have killed on Tumblr is what I'm saying. But okay, so I've talked about a lot of games so far that aren't Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I kind of assumed that I've spoken about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a lot in the past. And, I mean, I've been doing this for over 10 years. But the words flow to my mind as if I've told little bits and pieces of it to people. And here you get kind of the comprehensive whole. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a text parser game that really leant against all the surfaces of the kind of game it was. First of all, there are just some deliberate uses of a turn-based timer to fuck with you. There's a puzzle early on, where in order to unlock access to most of the rest of the game, you need a babelfish to stick in your ear. These are super common in the lore of the world, so much so that there's a vending machine that you can get one out of. In the book series and radio play, the babelfish is added to Arthur's life by Ford helpfully jamming it into his ear after getting it from that vending machine. In the text parser game, Ford is busy. You have to retrieve it from the vending machine yourself. It is a pretty neat little puzzle. You press a button to get a fish, and then immediately find a problem with how it's dispensed. So you solve the problem of how it's dispensed, and you press the button again. It dispenses another one, but your solution breeds a new problem, and now it falls in a grate. So you look at the grate, you devise a solution, you press a button on the vending machine and get another fish, which now goes from solution 1 to solution 2 to problem 3. You solve problem 3, press the button, and if you've done it like this, the vending machine is now out of fish. But it doesn't matter, because you're also out of time, and you get dragged off to solve another puzzle, which you can't because you can't understand any of the text being spoken to you. The only way to solve the puzzle is to know at least one of the steps ahead of time, and then you need to pick up all the guff you put down in the process because you're going to need all of it later. The game even asks you, as you're putting the pieces in place, hey, do you know what you're doing? Or are you winging it? It's mendacious, but also it's deliberately trying to engage you, the player, in a particular way, because I feel like this whole genre of game expected you to play with the whole of its text. That there was a reason every word was put in a description. It was to make reading it and engaging with it interesting. That's pretty cool, and the HTMLification of interactive text, which isn't a problem per se, but it presents a sort of first point, easiest point for the genre of interactive fiction it creates. It does lose some of this just because it needs to make its point of interface evident. Not that you can't get sneaky with it. You can make Twine games that notice that they've been rolled back or remember something that changes the past. This is an idea we talk about in game studies as hypertext, where text you can experience multiple times in different ways does not present a dozen readers a dozen paths, but rather all 12 readers experience the same path because they all go back and play all of them. Hypertextuality is something that games can do that most other media forms struggle with. It's not impossible, but it's hard. Effectively, if the text is a text that informs the text itself, that is, if you've experienced this text, you experience it the second time very differently. We've seen that all over the place. That's mystery stories. That's anything with a twist. That's great, and that can work out as a really effective storytelling tool. But video games ramp this into the sky. Anyway, I didn't bring up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to talk to you about hypertext. What I love about this game, and the thing I wanted to talk to you about, is this game gives you a text parser puzzle for demonstrating your capacity for abstract thought. You do this by showing an NPC that you are holding both T and not T. And like, obviously, when you think about it for a moment, of course you are, right? Like, if T is an inventory item, any other inventory item is not T. But that's not it. You have to specify that you show someone both T and the absence of T as a way of representing that you aren't just treating the objects in the game like entities in a parser. You have to momentarily play as Arthur Dent, imagining the ability to explain the difference between the thing in one hand and the absence of that thing in the other. And you have to do this while treating them all like entities in a parser. Because when you do all this, in your inventory, you get the item No T, which you carry around for the rest of the game.